welcome to Sangeeta, our speaker, who is a Senior Vice President of Marketing and Guest Experience at Alaska Airlines. Previous to her tenure at Alaska, Sangeeta has experience marketing brands such as Starbucks, Seattle's Best Coffee, and Unilever. We're quite excited and thrilled that she will share her experiences with us tonight, as well as answer any questions from faculty, students, and the general Embry-Riddle audience and community. So Sangeeta, thank you for being here with us this evening. I want to welcome you to this webinar.
Appreciate the nice introduction. Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from or zooming in from. Well, what I thought I'd do is a couple things. I can walk through my background and how I ended up at Alaska Airlines and my journey to get there, and maybe some things of what I love about what I do, what kind of gets me up in the morning, and then talk a little bit about branding and some of my experience when it comes to branding. And then we have a fun case study to share, and then we can open up for Q&A. So with that, I'll start a little bit about my background. It's kind of starting way back when from any of you that's from Michigan, I grew up at Michigan, go blue. I'm a Michigan Wolverine fan, and I was trained to always vote for Michigan football by my older brother. And my parents still live there. My dad worked for Ford Motor Company his whole life, and my dad and my brother and many people in my family are engineers, which I bet you some people on this call are also engineers as well. And when I went to college, my father said, you can go to Michigan, but you have two choices. You can either be an accountant or be an engineer. And growing up in a very traditional household, I didn't really have much of a choice. So I chose accounting because I wasn't sure if I had what it takes to become an engineer. And so I went to the Michigan Business School, graduated with an accounting degree. And I did that for a year. I worked for American Express for a year doing accounting. And for any accountants that might be in the session today, no offense whatsoever. I think I realized that there wasn't enough, dynamic change, excitement. I was looking for something more when I realized what accounting was all about. It was almost too predictable for me, and I kind of realized that I needed more than that. And so I actually was living in Minnesota at the time. I packed up my car, went to Chicago without a job, which my dad was not happy about because he just invested in all that education. And I started networking with a bunch of different folks, a lot of alumni as well, and really leveraged that hugely powerful network. And I ended up getting a job at Unilever. It was called Helene Curtis at the time, but working in a CPG company. And what I love about consumer packaged goods is it's so tangible, and that's super important to me. It's a tangible product. What's going to resonate with consumers with that product? How do you position that product in a way to kind of get consumers to pick it up? And I love that challenge and really understanding how to motivate consumers. And so I worked at Unilever for a big chunk of my career, 17 years actually. And I started in supply chain, and I learned what brand management and marketing was all about. And I think on the surface, some people who don't know anything about the profession thinks it's about creating video or designing things, but there's so much strategy in business when it comes to marketing, and I didn't realize that until I got closer to it at Unilever. I moved into brand management within Unilever, and I got my MBA at University of Chicago, which Unilever paid for, which was a huge benefit. And I kind of grew up in brand management. I grew up in more traditional brand management, I would say. And I think since then, marketing has it's turned into many different disciplines in the last, I would say, 10 or 15 years. But growing up in a traditional brand management environment, working on brands like Dove and Suave and Degree, and really understanding what it takes to really build a brand and all the different facets of that. It was almost being like a general manager of a brand. And I thought that was really super beneficial for me because it gave me a full view of how to lead a brand. So I did that for 17 years at Unilever. During my 17 years at Unilever, I also had 4 children. I got married and then I had 4 children. And so I pretty much grew up at Unilever, both personally and professionally. And it was a fantastic opportunity. And then actually Unilever, we were in Chicago at the time, and they decided to move out east. And we had a personal desire to move out to Seattle. We have family here. It's for those of you that have been out to Seattle, it's a stunning place to live. It's gorgeous everywhere. I'm looking at my window right now. It's some gorgeous trees. And I knew, because brands are so important to me, I knew the brand I wanted to work for was Starbucks. And so I networked once again, moved into Starbucks and worked at Seattle's Best Coffee. And that was really interesting because learned a lot about, how does Seattle Best Coffee, how do you work that brand in combination with the Starbucks brand? How do those two brands fit together synergistically versus trying to cannibalize each other? And how do you position the brands appropriately? And so learned a lot about that. From Seattle's Best Coffee, I moved into innovation at Starbucks and worked on some fun projects like, or initiatives, like putting the at-home coffee machine in people's kitchens throughout the world. We launched a machine called Verissimo to compete against the Keurig or the K-Cup machine. And I will say that innovation did okay, not great, but we learned a lot from it and launched in 7 different countries. Very aggressive launch to really try to provide a high-level coffee experience at home to compete with Nespresso and Keurig. Did that, and then we did a lot of innovation at Starbucks, really trying to fill the 5-year pipeline with innovative beverages that would keep driving traffic through our stores. Worked on that from a global perspective. And to be honest, I figured I would be at Starbucks for many years to come. And I got a call from from a recruiter for Alaska Airlines, and an airline was never on my radar, I'll be honest. I never even thought about it. And when the recruiter said that they're looking for a VP of marketing, it definitely piqued my interest. And so I took the interview. And for those of you that are familiar with Alaska or flown us, it is a unique company. It's super special in terms of the people of the company are so genuine and so kind. And when I met folks like our CEO, Brad Tilden, or our president, Ben Minicucci, the genuineness in terms of trying to do what's right for the company and do what's right for our guests is just phenomenal. And I really felt that. And so I took that role, and I've been now at Alaska for over 5 years. And my first year there was a whirlwind. The brand hadn't been touched in 25 years from a design standpoint. The liveries looked exactly the same for almost 25 years. The airport designs, every touch point from a guest standpoint, digitally and physically, hadn't really been touched. And within a year's time, I worked with a local agency here in Seattle, and we basically developed a clear brand positioning, like what does the Alaska brand stand for? And where we got to was the brand really stands for empathy. And we really understand our customers, and we work hard to service our customers, and this idea of genuine service. And from that brief, we redesigned absolutely almost every single asset within a year. And within a year, we relaunched the brand in 2016. New livery design, new airport experience, digital, everything lit up almost all at the same time. It was just phenomenal. And to see, we did a big reveal with over 3,000 employees, and to see the curtain raised and that new livery design was just, it was probably one of the high points of my career. It was just phenomenal. So we did that. And then we, almost later that year in 2016, I didn't get much rest. We announced we were going to acquire Virgin America, and it was official in December, I believe, in 2016. And then we went into integration in 2017 and 2018 to really integrate Virgin America into the Alaska brand. And I'll show you a little bit of a case study. There's a lot of strategy that went into how do we integrate the Virgin America brand? Do we keep both brands? Do we keep one brand? Which brand is it? Do we have a sub-brand? There's a lot of debate about the Virgin America brand because it has such amazing equity with people, both globally and domestically. And so we really had to understand what makes that brand tick, and what do we want to, how do we make sure we don't lose that? And what does that look like? And so we spent a lot of time. The acquisition was incredibly intense. Alaska has not been through an acquisition, I think, in many, many years. And so it was quite an intensive time period. So from the Virgin America acquisition, then it's been about growing in California and really aggressive going against the West Coast and building the right network, building building our guest loyalty base and our credit card base, and really building the business up and down the West Coast. And so, and then unfortunately, we were well on our way in 2020, early 2020, and then COVID hit, and almost overnight, pretty much overnight, bookings and travel just fell almost rock bottom. We were, at one point, we were flying 140,000 guests a day. I think we were down to 5,000 guests a day at its low point. We're up to, I want to say 50 or 60,000 guests a day right now, but it was, it's been quite a 6 or 8 months. I think the one couple good things that have been coming out of it, we did right before COVID hit, we did announce our partnership and our entry into Oneworld, which really impacts our, our global network, our domestic network, and is a more deeper relationship with American Airlines. And so our goal, when we set out in 2020, our goal was to set our brand on a national stage. And we were well on our way to building that network, both with Oneworld and with American, and really giving our guests access around the world. And we'll get back on that track, but 2020 has definitely been a diversion with COVID, and now it's time to get back on that. So with that, what I can do is show the Virgin America case study and kind of talk you through that. And maybe before, Emily, before you bring up the case study, just to explain a little bit of the work that we did before we decided to basically retire the Virgin America brand and keep the Alaska brand. And it was, we definitely took a very objective lens to that. We took a huge step back. We partnered with BCG and embarked on a massive amount of research to really make sure we were making the right decision. And what we did is, and it's a classic case of marketing or a brand strategy and how to go about this. We basically took the entire airline market. And so we surveyed over 5,000 guests with a predominance of people who live on the West Coast. And we basically, we sized the total airline market, and the total airline market at the time was $100 billion in revenue. And then we segmented that market, that $100 billion, we sliced based on the research into 13 demand segments. And based on those 13 demand guest segments, we said, these are the 4 that makes sense, that will grow our business, that will appeal to the broadest set of guests, and that will bring us the greatest amount of revenue over the longer term. Of those 4 guest segments, we said, okay, which brand is going to resonate most with these guest segments? Is it going to be the Virgin America brand or the Alaska brand? And a couple of things that came out of that research was the Virgin America brand actually had, it really clearly stood for something. It stood for fun. It stood for feel good. It had a huge entertainment value to it. Even their onboard guest experience with their seatback screens and the on-demand ordering, it had a lot of very cool branding things that made Virgin America unique. But it was also more narrow. It appealed to a smaller group of folks versus the Alaska brand. On the plus side, the Alaska brand was more broadly appealing to a larger group of guests, setting us up for future growth. But the challenge with the Alaska brand, which I'll even talk about later, is we didn't really clearly stand for something and have that kind of that clear point of view like Virgin America did. And to me, that's one of our Achilles heels right now as we kind of go into the future. Is we need a bit more of an edge. We need to make sure we stand for a couple of clear things so people know who we are. And so we're a little bit more faceless than Virgin America. But that being said, we knew we could transform the Alaska brand to still appeal to that broader group of people versus Virgin America. The other thing that the research with BCG revealed was the amount of loyalty that we have built in the Pacific Northwest is so deep. The loyalty that we have built with our guest base is deeper than any other airline has built in their respective hometown. And so we knew we had a secret sauce where we know how to build deep loyalty, and that loyalty pays off year after year after year. And so what it really should, and that loyalty was even deeper than what Virgin America folks had with their flyers. And so it showed us that if we were to go with the Virgin America brand name and get rid of the Alaska brand, we would have lost a lot more because of the loyalty we've built in the Pac Northwest. We would have lost a lot of flyers. It was less risky to retire the Virgin America brand and keep the Alaska brand, but we also knew we needed the Alaska brand to appeal to Californians, and how do we evolve our brand to do that, if that makes sense. So with that, I can, Emily, if you want to bring up the slides. So the case study is the branding piece. So we made the decision to retire the Virgin America brand, and I remember probably a not so high point in my career was announcing it to 3,000 Virgin America employees that we had to make the tough decision to retire the brand, and that was a tough day. I remember. But then our next challenge was, okay, we're going to keep the Alaska brand, but we need to appeal to Californians and specifically appeal to people in San Francisco that love the Virgin America brand. How do we tell them that this is going to be okay? Because of this merger, you're going to get goodness out of it. You're going to get more loyal. You're going to get more rewards. You can get more routes. You're going to get even more perks by us coming together, because you're going to get more utility out of these airlines coming together. And Alaska is a great brand. And so the idea that kind of came out with the marketing campaign of how do we appeal to these folks in San Francisco particularly, and we said, I don't know if you guys ever, you see couples that you, in your lifetime, you know, there's couples that you come across and you're like, I'm not really sure I would have put those two people together because they seem so different, whether it's in personality or style or whatever. And I think people looked at our two brands of Virgin America and Alaska, and they said, they would look at our two brands and said, they don't make sense together either. And so we kind of came up with this campaign idea around different works, and things that may seem different on the outside actually do work well together. So with that, if you go to the next slide, Emily. So the challenge was to convince Bay Area flyers that Alaska and Virgin America do belong together and we can make good things together. The insight is two great opposites coming together can create something new and even better. And the idea is different works highlight other unexpected but surprisingly great combinations. And I think the next one might be the video, Emily. If you want to play the video.
Alaska Air is buying Virgin America for about $2.6 billion, outbidding rival JetBlue.
Alaska Air and Virgin are very different. Virgin has kind of an edgy, some would say kind of irreverent kind of a brand.
All right, Emily, if you go to the next slide. So then we basically blanketed all of San Francisco area with out of home. We took over transit and we came, our agency is Mechanism. They're actually based in San Francisco, which I think proved to be quite beneficial for us because they kind of understood the emotional loss of Virgin America and what that meant for the San Francisco market. And so you see some really fun headlines. I will say some of these headlines did not do well with some of our Alaska employees. They felt we were being a little bit too provocative in some of the language. And so, but Virgin America is provocative and that's their brand. And so we really, it was an interesting debate of how far do we push it and how do we make sure we still stay true to who we are as Alaska brand, but also understand that we need to evolve our brand to appeal to a broader group of people in California. And what does that look like? And I think it's not that we need to change everything about us, but it's we need to, the core of who we are will always be the same, but it's just putting slightly different clothes on a little bit just to showcase we can evolve and we can appeal to a broader set of people. So if you go to the next slide. This is examples of the out of home, and then the next slide. This is the transit we took over. We basically just blanketed it, and I got even text messages and notes from friends and family that lived in the SFO area, and it really made a fantastic impact. And the colors of the blue and the red really coming together was really key as well. Next slide. This is the livery. I remember we actually, we were going to do for, so as you probably know, Virgin America is all Airbus and we're all Boeing. So we wanted to paint one Boeing and one Airbus with this more to love design. And it would be flip-flop. One would go blue to red and one red to blue. And we wanted both planes on the day that the acquisition was final. We wanted both planes to fly side by side and land into SFO, and would have a massive party with our employees in San Francisco and key influencers and government officials and all of that. And I remember we didn't have enough time to paint both planes, and we couldn't get access to the Airbus planes because we didn't officially own Virgin America yet. And it was a very stressful time. And so we finally said, you know what, we're going to have to paint a Boeing because we knew we could have access to that. And then we were going to have one Alaska livery, one Virgin America livery flying on either side of it, and all three planes would come in together. So that was the original intent. I think weather that day and everything became a bit of a challenge. So it ended up being just this one plane landing in on the day that the acquisition was final. But it was fantastic. The energy was great. It was just a really important moment for the company. Next slide. This was, you know, one thing that I'm a big believer in, and Natalie and my team and her team is they're fantastic at activating the ideas and making sure the idea is just not billboards, it's just not digital. It actually permeates kind of the every single touch point with the guest. And so on that day, I believe it was December 16th of 2016, we went big and basically did a ton of in-airport activation where flyers who were flying on either Virgin America or Alaska that day got bacon. They actually did get bacon on a donut. Trying to get special foods inside an airport was not easy. We activated in the city as well. And so, and even in the seatback card, on every seatback card for all flyers for months, it had the headline of different works, and really showcasing to our flyers the benefits of why coming together actually helps them. It expands their network, expands the value of their loyalty program. There was a lot of goodness to why coming together made sense for them. Next slide. It's just some more visuals of the activation. We actually had all of our frontline folks, flight attendants, CSA agents, everybody wear these t-shirts in the lower left, which were a huge hit. Next slide. And these were some of the results. You know, we definitely made an impact. We grew unaided awareness, we grew consideration, and I believe the final slide, if you flip to that, airline consideration is the first row, genuinely better than other airlines, keeps getting better and has a lot going for it. And so in that time period when that campaign was in market, we definitely made an impact in SFO. And I will say, we gave a lot of goodies as well to Virgin America flyers. We gave them, I believe it was something to the tune of over 10,000 bonus miles to make sure they flipped over to our loyalty program. And then they even got more goodness when they did. We made sure we upped everyone's elite status on Virgin America and gave them even, I think, the next status higher on Alaska. So we tried really hard to woo them and to win them over. And in a lot of cases it worked. And I will say a lot of cases, you know, a lot of Virgin America folks were diehard loyal and they went somewhere else. And that's okay too. But I would say now it's been what, 3 years now. And we're really pleased with how we've been able to grow our loyalty in California with the Alaska brand. So with that, maybe what I can do is Emily, do you want to go to the next case study or you want to go to Q&A?
All right, we can go to the next case study, and then I'm collecting all the questions for you for the end.
Okay, great.
While we're bringing it up, how about you take a question?
Sure.
Second here. So we have, when you rebranded, what role did the visual design and the colors have in your decision-making process for the colors of designs?
Well, it was actually, and I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but it was actually really hard at first because obviously the Virgin America was red and purple and nothing to do with our brand coloration. But I think the brilliance of the different works idea and bringing the two colors together actually really made a visual impact for the campaign. I think the visual of the red and the blue coming together to create kind of that purple middle that you see in the More to Love livery was worked really, really well. And it was very distinctive and people remembered it. In fact, people love the More to Love livery so much that I think we have, I want to say we have one other, we painted another one. I think we ended up painting an Airbus finally. I thought we had a third, but I could be wrong. But it's one of, and we have little models of the More to Love livery and people love that one. And so I think the visual design is so key because it really brought the idea to life. I think the one thing is important to remember, any of these insights or ideas, every aspect of the idea just matters. Every detail matters to bring it to life. And just being relentless that it's all intrinsic and it all links together is super important. I'm really a believer that any idea needs to be intrinsic to what you're trying to do. So even with brand decisions that we make, is it intrinsic to who we are, to who our brand is versus generic? And that's just an important debate to have all the time. All right, so the next case study. So this one was, you see a lot of fair sales. I'm on the Southwest mailing list and you get a lot of fair sales every single day, $49. And how do you make fair sales really stand out and not, I think people after a while become numb to them. And at the time, we really wanted to break through again to California and see what we could do to make it more interesting and more intelligent, if you will. And so in partnership again with Mechanism, if you go to the next slide, we came up with the idea called Swell Fairs. So the challenge was, the environment was, the California market is hugely competitive, and particularly in California, but up and down the West Coast. And so how do we kind of create something that's more unique when it comes to fair sales? And the insight was surfers make up a huge population of travelers on the West Coast, and the right wave in the right place can make them drop anything for a last minute trip. And so the idea here was, when the higher the wave, the higher the discount. And it actually we kind of called it, you use science and data to really to drive the discount. And so we actually had a website, or on our as.com website, we were tracking the waves, hour by hour. And if it hit it, like for example, above 20 feet, you could get up to a 30% discount. And the uniqueness of the discount varies based on the wave height made it super positive. If you go to the next slide. Here are some of the assets that we did. Bigger waves equals big discounts. And you can kind of see the visual here with, now you can get up to 15% off because the wave has hit 11 to 15 feet and so forth. And so again, really making the idea intrinsic to the fair sale. If you go to the next slide. And one more. The media ate this up. It was fantastic. The amount of national coverage we got on this idea was phenomenal. We actually were a bit surprised by how well it did. And so you can see 494 million impressions across a lot of different publications, just a ton of press on the idea. And the impact was great. If you go to the last slide. It did positively impact load factors for the month of November. And in fact, now this idea has done well for us and it's becoming more ownable to Alaska. We've been doing it on other things. So in the Northern Lights, I think on the intensity of the light, the discount gets higher. We're doing something right now with Russell Wilson in the Seattle market, where for every touchdown that he throws for home games, you get 10% off. But we cap it at 4 touchdowns because on the first game, I believe he threw 5, and our CFO texted me and he said, we capped it, right? And yes, we did cap it at 40%. But so it's a fun way to engage guests on sales in a way that's different than just slapping $49 fares everywhere. So we've been really pleased with this. We tend to use it more to really engage our guests in a different way. So with that, Emily, if I can hand it over to you if you want to start Q&A.
Sure, we have lots of questions, so we'll do as many as we have time for here. How does Alaska study the long-term impact of rebranding? What metrics do you use to measure that?
It's interesting. I would say it's a hard, visual rebranding is a hard thing to actually measure. Modernizing a brand, making it feel more relevant. It's actually hard to really measure that, but you just continue to look at your brand preference scores to make sure they're strong. Are they strong with the younger demographic and as well as the older demographic? Are you not going backwards in that? And in hindsight, being 2020, the rebranding timing couldn't have been more perfect because then we acquired Virgin America. I think if we had our old livery design and the old branding, and at the time we acquired Virgin America, I think we would have seen like a very dated brand. And I think that campaign, even different works, I'm not sure if it would have even worked because we still had so much more modernizing of the brand to do. And so I will say there are more brand health metrics, which are harder to move, harder to measure, but it comes down to your brand preference. So those scores all continue to do well. And then and we're starting to build that in California.
Thank you. Next one, what was the biggest challenge transitioning from a product focus at Unilever and with the coffee organizations to a service to the airline brand strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's I will tell you, working for an airline is probably the hardest job I will ever have in my entire life. It is incredibly more complex and more competitive. Just the fact that you have a guest in your care for could be up to 10 hours, right? If it's a 6-hour flight to Hawaii, time they get to the airport, the time they deplane, the time they get their bags. And there's so many different guest touch points where you can succeed or fail. It's really hard. And, versus you go into a Starbucks store, it's like maybe a 5-minute interaction. But making sure you're keeping your guests satisfied and happy for that amount of time, and the number of things that can go wrong, weather delays, mechanical delays. How do you flight cancellations when COVID hit, the amount of cancellations was massive, and how do you reaccommodate passengers? So I would say the guest piece is incredibly more complicated than it is even from my Starbucks days or in the retail world. And then I think just running the business from an operations standpoint, revenue management standpoint, margins are tough. It's a tough industry, especially right now with COVID. So I would say, my first couple of years, it was personally and professionally really hard for me. I won't lie. And but I've learned a lot, and I've come to appreciate that anyone that works for an airline is kind of a glutton for punishment, but it's so dynamic and it's so challenging and invigorating. It really, there's not one single dull moment working for an airline. And I find it just, that's what I love about it. I love the constant change. I love the challenges.
Thanks. What were the challenges in integrating Alaska Airlines and Virgin with the marketing staff into one team together? And how did you overcome those challenges?
From a team standpoint?
Yes, with the two marketing staffs together.
Yeah, so what we did, and it was hard, the Virgin America employees from the front line as well as management, they signed up to be part of the Virgin America brand. I think when you sign up to work for Alaska, a lot of folks sign up to work for an airline. I think a lot of folks signed up to be part of the brand versus the airline on the Virgin America side. So it wasn't easy to convince, we really wanted to bring as many marketing folks over as possible. The other challenge was people were living in San Francisco, which is a great place to live. And so to incentivize them to come to Seattle was also challenging. And so we brought over not a lot, a handful of marketing folks that were willing to make the leap to come to Alaska, both from a professional standpoint, because it wasn't the brand they signed up for, which I totally get, but it was also a personal thing to move from SFO to Seattle. And so we did get a handful of folks, but I will tell you, 3 years fast forward till 2020, there's just a small handful of Virgin America folks that are in the Alaska organization, and it's for a number of reasons. I think it's cultural fit. It's the way the business is run. I will tell you the one thing that I think what makes the reason why Alaska was able to even buy Virgin America, and the reason why Alaska is going to come out of this pandemic probably one of the strongest airlines out of all of them, is our ability to manage cost and manage our P&L. We're very financially, I guess, savvy organization that where cost management is kind of something that's part of our DNA and is what's made us successful in the way we operate our airline as well, the operations piece of the business. And I think the DNA of Virgin America was different. It was more on the marketing side, the brand side, and it was different. And so I think a culture is kind of built over decades, and the Alaska culture was more about that financial discipline. And I think that's what makes Alaska successful. I will tell you though, from a frontline standpoint, we tried really hard to make sure we brought our frontline in and welcome them into the Alaska family. So much so that Virgin America's purpose was creating an airline people love. And we actually thought that was a fantastic articulation. And for those of you that know Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, when you talk to random folks at the grocery store or at a school meeting or whatever, people say, I love Alaska. And for people to say, I love an airline, it doesn't happen very often. It's actually a rare statement. And so we actually took over Virgin America's purpose of creating an airline people love. And that's what you see as you walk into our corporate headquarters in Seattle by the airport. We also revised our values, and we worked together as one culture with Virgin America Frontline and our own teams to say, let's come up with our values together. And so we got to 5 values, and Ben Minicucci, our president, led us to this to really try to say, this is one culture. We are all going to live against these 5 values and build the Alaska brand together. And the 5 values are: be kind-hearted, do the right thing, deliver performance, be remarkable. And the first one before all those other 4 is own safety. And those are the 5 that we've rallied around since we acquired Virgin America to really try to weave in merge together the frontline cultures.
Thank you. The next one is, traditionally, airline lounges have not been major profit centers. Can you talk about how the Alaska Lounge product contributes to the overall brand and the guest experience, and how you see that evolving in light of Alaska joining Oneworld?
Good question. Actually, we met for almost 2 hours today on the lounge P&L and how to make it stronger. I will say the lounge product is truly, like you said, it's truly a guest experience type of product. It's all about investing in our guests with that product. Most of our lounge members are elite members, so they're either golds or gold 75Ks. And so it's a very high touch, upscale experience that we'd like to have for our guests. In fact, for those of you that fly through Seattle, we just built a 15,000 square foot lounge in our flagship lounge, first ever in Seattle on the North Satellite. And it's just stunning. And I think it's actually a great expression, I think, of how it has a really nice Pacific Northwest yet aviation type of design to it that really, I think, brings our brand to life in a really nice modern way. But I will tell you, the lounges are not meant to be a huge profit center for us. They're really meant to be a true guest experience, much like giving hot first class meals to our passengers or giving, free beverages to our guests in main cabin, things of that sort. And we've spent a lot of money renovating our lounges over the past couple of years. And I'm glad that we've spent a lot of time renovating our lounges over the past couple of years, invested in this flagship lounge, because now with Oneworld, it's going to be exciting. Well, one, if you're a lounge member now, you also get access to all of the American Airlines Emeralds clubs throughout the U.S., which is a huge benefit. But the other piece with Oneworld, if you're an elite on Alaska, if you're Gold 75K or MVP Gold, if you're traveling international, you can enter into any of the Oneworld lounges internationally. So British's lounge or American, for that matter, any of the Oneworld members. A Oneworld elite, if you're a Ruby, Emerald, Sapphire, can enter into our lounges when they're traveling as well. And so that just opens up our lounge program for folks, which is fantastic. Next question.
Sorry. When Alaska decided to move away from the prayer cards for flyers, was there any pushback from the evangelical community? Was a question asked.
I'll be honest, I wasn't here when that decision was made, when the prayer cards was taken off, and I actually can't remember what year it was. I can't honestly answer that question because I don't know what the pushback was at the time.
Thank you. How different was the actual work and challenges from what was assumed during the pre-M&A work that you did?
I would say the work is very different. To figure out how to integrate 2 loyalty programs, 2 brands, 2 onboard food and beverage programs, 2 onboard in-flight entertainment and satellite Wi-Fi programs. The amount of work that it takes for integration, how do you redo the aircraft in terms of renovating the interior cabin to make it look like for Alaska? What decisions how far are you going to invest in? There were so many different integration decisions. It was very different than running the airline day to day. And I would say that was pretty much all consuming for all of 2017 for sure, and definitely into 2018. Doing an acquisition is, it takes up a huge amount of mind share versus running the airline, and it just became very, very intense time.
Thank you very much. Have your reputation management scores improved with this rebranding and the merger?
Well, we measure, I will tell you, we don't necessarily, we built a kind of a custom measure that we call brand strength, of how we measure how our brand's doing. And it's based on a couple of different factors. One is, how is our brand performing for you? And are we a brand that you prefer over other airlines? And we look at those scores quantitatively to really understand, is our brand continuing to strengthen? Is our brand, getting better over time, or is it stagnant, or is it moving backwards? And so based on brand performance and brand preference scores, we look at that by geography and say, okay, we're moving in the right direction. And I will say that our scores are very, very strong in the Pacific Northwest, and they've always been strong in the Pacific Northwest. Even when Delta came in 2012, 2013, our brand scores continue to do really well. In California, I will say, part of our challenge in California, it's an awareness issue first. We still need a lot of people to know us. They don't know who we are. And one of the brand challenges I forgot to mention is, because we have the name Alaska and we have our Alaska native on the tail, a lot of people think we're still a regional airline, and we maybe are based in Anchorage and we fly Seattle, Anchorage, and that's about it. And so we have a lot of awareness building to do. And then once we do that, all of our research says, once people fly us once, they actually come back to us time and time again, because they love the experience and they realize, like, oh, I didn't realize Alaska goes to all these places and they have great service. And so, I wish in my CPG days, it's easy to do a massive sampling program and send a bottle of shampoo to every Californian. I wish I could do that and send a free flight to every Californian. I can't afford that, but we just need to get the trial. But for those that know us, our brand is definitely strong. We just need the awareness in California.
Thank you. Next one, have you faced any challenges with the Eskimo as your brand icon? Considering sensitivity to heritage and branding in the current climate, is the image celebrated by those it represents, or have you experienced problems with this?
I will tell you, it was interesting when we relaunched the brand in 2016, when I was there. There was a lot of debate about what we call him and how do we make sure we're respectful of the Alaska Native community in the state of Alaska. We did a lot of focus groups. We talked to a lot of people to make sure we're being respectful. I will be honest, I think we made a couple of missteps back in 2016. But now we're in a phase, particularly even more recently. You see that the Washington football team is looking to rename themselves. We're calling him our Alaska native, and we're super proud of who he is. And, sometimes we call him the smile, we call him our Alaska native, and he represents our brand. He's, we try to do what's right by him because he's been part of our brand for, decades. At one point we had 4 different tail designs, and then he became our lead tail design. I want to say it was 25 or 30 years ago. I don't have the exact number of years, but so he will live on our tail, and he is our brand icon, and we're super proud of him. And I think as long as we're respectful to the Alaska Native community and the Alaska state of Alaska, I think we'll be in good shape.
Awesome. Thank you. So the aviation business seems to be a perfectly competitive market with a high regulatory guidance. In such an industry, is customer service the only way or the best way to stand out and create differentiation?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think, it's interesting. We've been really trying hard to be even more clear about what our brand stands for. And I talked about in 2015, we said, our brand's about empathy, and we even have gotten tighter. And I would say the one thing that I think that our brand stands for that I don't think many other airline brands can say is that I think we care. We genuinely care for our guests. The stories are phenomenal of what you hear, of what our guests do or what our agents do, our flight attendants do, our res agents do to really help our guests get to where they need to get to. So I think service does matter. It's a big differentiator. I think it's what's made Alaska successful for decades. What I will say though is we have to keep innovating on the product side. I think Delta is a strong competitor, and they do really well on the product side as well. Whether it's the in-flight entertainment product or the food and beverage or the digital check-in process, all those types of things. So innovation is key also to continue to build the Alaska brand. But yeah, I think customer service is, I think there's evidence to say that because I think the fact that people say I love Alaska is because of our secret sauce of how we treat our guests.
Thank you. Where do the majority of your ideas, like the Hawaii discount, where do those come from? Do you seek input from customers for things like this?
We do a couple of things. One is we have a fantastic, I will say, I think the marketing team that we have they're amazing and they're super creative. Combined with our agency mechanism, they're also very creative as well. And I think it's about just creative problem solving of what is the problem we're trying to go after, and then how do we go creatively solve it. We do guest panels as well, and we get good insight from our guests also. And so I'm a big believer in that. And so we call them gold advisory panels. And before COVID, we actually had we would have a panel made up of our elites, about 10 or 15 people. And we had one in San Francisco, San Jose, Portland, and Seattle. We met with them 4 times a year, and we would go through tons of questions and pick their brain. What do you think about this new first class meal? What do you think about, should we give a drink or a chocolate to our elites? What would they like better? What about our cabin interiors? What if we, improve the seat comfort this way and get their feedback? And so I'm a big believer of always checking in with guests on a regular basis, even if they're small questions or even big questions of, should we consider evolving our loyalty program to doing something like this? And just really stretching the envelope, because I think there's always good insight to be had. We were just talking to Gold Advisory Board members this past week around lounges, and there's some really good ideas that came out of that. And so we're going to go pursue that. And so I think the ideas actually come from everywhere. It's just more about how do you weave them all together or stitch them together to solve the problem that you're trying to go solve.
Thank you so much. We have so many more good questions in the box here. I think we might have room for just this last one of what advice would you give to a student who's currently going into the field of marketing, specifically aviation marketing? What advice would you have for them?
That is a big question. I think, and I said this earlier, I think because marketing has become very big, and it's big in terms of because of performance media, SEM, SEO, digital marketing, machine learning, AI, there's so many different facets of how to be a stronger marketer. And I think you kind of have to figure out what makes you tick. Is it more the loyalty marketing side? Is it more the customer, the guest experience side? Is it more the branding side? There's so many different facets of marketing. And my advice is to try to figure out, map a plan for, these are all the different marketing skill sets that I want to build over time that will get me to this kind of a role that I would get really excited about, and kind of build your experience set this way, that way. My thing is I'm big on, I've been trained and grown up in doing brand strategy, brand positioning, and then product innovation, product positioning. Brand and product are kind of my two things. But I knew I had deficiencies in the performance marketing space. And so, Natalie Bowman, who's on my team, she's just a huge expert when it comes to the marketing technology space, digital marketing, social media, and she really fills a big gap in my experience. And so I think the goal is to be part of a team where everybody has a skill set, and together it's even more powerful. And so I think you have to figure out what is your power skill set that you're going to build over time, and then kind of keep working towards that and building that. And, the other advice I give to people is try to figure out what your secret sauce is. Know what your strengths are, and make sure you know how to talk about your strengths, and keep building on those. I think that's really important to do in any career, is just know what your strengths are and then double down on those.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we can squeak in one more. So it's thank you for sharing with us these effective strategies of Alaska to build a memorable brand. What types of process control and continuous improvement strategies do you use to maintain that competitive advantage?
Wow, that's a very structured question. I would say, well, I don't know if this answers your question, but one thing that we did probably in the last 2 to 3 years, is we built a very robust, reporting system or dashboard system across every facet of the marketing group. And so now we have dashboards for in-flight entertainment. What is the take rate? How many people are watching movies? What movies are working? Satellite Wi-Fi, are there any issues on planes? Are people able to connect? The level of detailed reporting we have on every part of our business across the onboard experience, including food and beverage, loyalty, mileage plan and credit card, performance marketing, traditional marketing, social media, the amount of dashboards and reporting we have built over the last couple years helps us make sure that we're constantly improving, and that we're making sure that we're constantly delighting our guests. The other thing we started was, it's called the guest performance leadership, where we had a few folks on our team build these dynamic dashboards where now we look at the guest experience all the way from booking to the time they pick up their bag. And we are starting to measure every aspect of the guest experience and trying to make sure we're optimizing it. We're finding holes, and how do we make that experience better, or how do we do what the SFO station is doing and bring that to the San Jose station, for example. And so going deep into the data, making sure that we're monitoring everything is kind of what makes you better.
Sangeeta, thank you so much for this wonderful and enlightening and educating conference here. Truly appreciate it. It's been instructional. And to the audience who participated, thank you as well. I know it's Friday evening for most of us. Thank you for taking the time to attend. I hope you learned something. You picked up some interesting pieces of information that will help you expand just individually, or if you're a professor, then hopefully you can bring in some of these lessons into your classes. So Sangeeta, from all of us at Embry-Riddle and College of Business, thank you so much once again. And everybody, thank you and have a great evening.